So when Kevin Carson was on my show, he actually mentioned Henry George as being influenced by Proudhon. Do you see that as being the case?
Yeah, well, Henry George actually mentions Proudhon in, it's either the introduction or the preface of Progress and Poverty, Henry George's famous book. And he kind of mentions that he's trying to extend the, he didn't use the term libertarian socialist. I forget the terms he used exactly. But essentially he was saying that he was trying to extend the libertarian socialist project of Proudhon. But the main difference between Georgism and mutualism would be that George wasn't necessarily so critical of the state. He was more of a classical liberal, and he was fond of a Republican-style government, so he wanted to make significant changes, like allowing for a women's Congress and things like that. But the main difference is actually just that Henry George wasn't opposed to the state, while Proudhon would see the state as a kind of infringement on that ethic of reciprocity, because the state's an involuntary institution. And actually, Proudhon had very, very similar views to Henry George, though they weren't as well worked out, and I think it's useful to look at Henry George's work for that reason. But Proudhon did tackle the issue of economic rent and did suggest in some of his works, like The General Idea of the Revolution, that economic rent was an issue to be sorted out, though he'd sort it out in different ways from Henry George sometimes. He did mention rent payments, but he would also be more okay with distributing land in a manner that would make up for differences in quality with differences in quantity. I don't necessarily think that works out so well. I think the Georgist solution is a little better. But Proudhon, in that sense, was something of a proto-Georgist in that he did deal with economic rent. It was a major concern of his. And they both really inherited that from the classical liberal tradition. People like Thomas Paine, even people like Baruch Spinoza, thought that the rent of the land was an issue to be sorted out.